In the big sports, professional athletes sharpen their skills on the best training bases, on which their clubs spend tons of money. Their approach to business is to spend money for the sake of good results. In esports, it's basically the same. Top teams live in gaming houses where they have stuff for cooking and cleaning, while gamers train, sitting in front of the PC with the best and newest gear. But what about what happens on the server? In Dota 2, they have an MMR system, yes, but what should CS players do? Go to matchmaking and annihilate a pack of global elites on 64 tick rate? No thanks. Faceit thought the same, and in 2015 they sent a bunch of emails to pro CS players asking them to give feedback about their new idea, a private league for the highest level CSGO players with only 2 members who could qualify each month. We wonder, could they imagine that they were creating something that would dramatically change the CSGO landscape? That soon, players would be fighting for qualification spots, cry about getting kicked out, and some of them would even do match fixing. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. You are watching CYBERSHOKE, and this is the story of FPL, a place where all the best CS players train. Let's start with Faceit itself. What is it? Well, the company was founded in 2011 in London. In general, for CSGO, Faceit acts like a much better alternative for matchmaking. They have 128 tick rate, a sophisticated anti-cheat, and most importantly, a transparent ranking system, which firstly divides players in a more honest way than CSGO, and secondly, allows you to understand how many points you need to reach the next level. CSGO community always perceived Faceit as a platform for people who take this game more seriously. Some time ago, they organized big tournaments. Remember ECS, the biggest competitor of EPL? It was the doing of Faceit. In 2019, they shut down the ECS project to manage Flashpoint's technical side. But most importantly, in 2018, Faceit was trusted by Valve to host a major. This year, Faceit and ESL were acquired by the Public Investment Fund of Saudi Arabia. They paid more than $1.5 billion for both companies in total and plan to merge them into the ECL Faceit group in the future. They formed FPL in 2015 in order to solve 2 problems. Firstly, professional players were complaining about how boring their matchmaking games are. It was very unproductive. And secondly, players who wanted to prove themselves at pro level didn't really know how they could. And then Faceit created FPL, a place where professionals could play with each other, and to qualify for their closed community would be to show a sign of real skill. The first season of FPL was held in Europe in 2015, and since then it takes place every month. They also had a couple of attempts to launch FPL in the States, but eventually it failed. Every season, players compete for the prize pool of $20,000. Of course, that isn't the main motivation of FPL members, but when you look at how much ZywOo has earned in FPL, you realize just how much pro players are getting paid. From the very beginning, FPL earned the reputation of a very prestigious league. For instance, in 2016, when 13-year-old Slovakian player Frozen got into the FPL through direct qualifications, he became a superstar for some time in the CSGO world. If you think about it, this guy didn't win anything. He just qualified to play in the league. But just the achievement of getting into FPL was so difficult that nobody could imagine that it was possible at just 13 years old. Of course, for admins, it was one thing to create FPL and another to keep it running. And it goes without saying that when your audience is the best CSGO players in the world, it's not that easy to keep them satisfied. But admins did everything they could. For example, even Sasha Simple could get a ban for being toxic. And mods didn't really care about your skill or your achievements. And when half of the league was bullying Ropes and calling him a cheater, Faceit invited Rob into their office to play there for one weekend, just to give the guy a much-needed chance to prove himself clean and get rid of toxic situations like that. FPL quickly became a place from where you can easily get into a Tier 1 team. There are a lot of examples like Ropes, who got invited into the mouse sports after proving that he was not cheating, or Brokey, who basically got into the FaZe clan by doing great in FPL. And how many got into Tier 2 or Tier 3 teams through FPL? You just can't count. And our favorite is a team, Bad News Eagles, which fully consists of FPL players. On the last major, the guys got into the Legend stage.
Shallow, he's gone. It's only Woody up against an AWP. Flatro's done it, and so have the Eagles, soaring to the Legend stage. Magnificent. There isn't a human being that cannot empathize and celebrate with them. Look at their faces. It says it all.
Very impressive. Of course, when FPL became basically a ticket into the big Counter-Strike, some bad and dirty things started to happen. And if some guy paid 10 or 15 bucks to other FPL members for them to not play any matches, that's something we can laugh about. Then cases like this one, where players got banned after the attempt to trick everyone at the FPLC qualifications, that showed us how serious things are. In general, scandals like this, where some players try to trick the system and unfairly get into the FPL, are a norm now. For example, Lollipop and Waro2K were involved in such scandals, but later got acquitted. It's obvious that when a project's so big and important and functions for several years, there will inevitably be problems with it, and FPL is no exception to this rule. Simple and Nico once were so tired of noob players in the league that they announced a new hub on Faceit where only actual pro players would be allowed to play, but for some reason the project was closed. Faceit mods did everything they could to keep the high level of FPL players, but after years of expansion, they kind of lost it, mostly because many of the older players just didn't match new league standards. It was clear that it wasn't enough to occasionally kick a couple of the weak players, so admins started something called kick waves, where they would kick dozens of players in one night. They didn't care how much you achieved in your career, you could be a major champion, but if you weren't playing good enough right now, you would be kicked. But Simple says that the best of what he's still getting in the games is Tier 3 players, so the problem still isn't solved. But it's great that Faceit is actually trying to do something about it. Faceit Pro League was created as a special place for pro players to train with each other, and quickly became an essential part of the professional CSGO ecosystem. Young players can sit at their homes and get into the best teams and win thousands of dollars every month just by playing Faceit. And though FPL has its own flaws, it still has done a lot to develop esports in our favorite game.